right. Okay, all right. I literally pressed record and his little ears perk up and he's like, oh, hello, hi, welcome, thank you so much for being here and clicking on this video. I went a little ham recently and bought some books. I bought these books over probably like the last 6-7-ish weeks or so not all at once, but yeah, I've been slowly accumulating them little by little. A couple of these I've read. A couple of these I had in my April wrap up. A couple of these I will have upcoming in my May wrap up. I have about a dozen books. I've organized them for the sake of this video by how I got them, like where I got them, how I acquired them. I know 12 books is kind of a lot for 2 months, but I'm justifying this by telling myself I typically do buy more books in like the first half of the year than I do the second half of the year. All right, let's get into the list. Okay, I have That's exactly what I wanted to happen. I have 2 books that I actually won in Goodreads giveaways. All right, so the first book is The Antidote by Karen Russell. This is a historical fiction. It takes place in Nebraska during the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. I think this follows 5 distinct characters. I'm not sure if it's told like in different point of views. It doesn't look like it. It sounds like there's a touch of magical realism in this story as well. There's a character named the Prairie Witch. There's someone who is the witch's apprentice, and the summary says there's a time traveling camera. So it sounds like a touch either speculative fiction or magical realism. There's some like soft fantasy element to the story, which I absolutely love in a book. I do tend to really enjoy historical fiction. I would say it's not necessarily a genre I read a lot in, but I feel like the historical fiction I do read most of the time I really, really love. There's a lot of elements of this that sound really appealing to me. And I know that this author, I think she won a Pulitzer. Am I making that up? She was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. She did not win, so I kind of did make that up. But yeah, I haven't read anything by her, but I'm excited to check this out. I don't necessarily have any like concrete plans for when I'm gonna pick this up, but I'm glad that I have it. I can't believe I won this, and it's a finished copy. That's so exciting. The next book that I won in a Goodreads giveaway is an ARC, and this comes out in July. The Lake's Water is Never Sweet. It's by Julia Caminito, and it's translated by Hope Campbell Gustafson. It takes place in the 1990s. It follows a young woman named Gaia. I think she's a teenager, and her family moves from Rome to this like suburban lakeside town, and it sounds like a coming of age story with a lot of like family drama, family tension, and then like the normal like growing up teenager topics like friends, bullies, crushes. I personally am a sucker for a good coming of age story. This feels really like gritty and very summery, kind of giving me like Dogs of Summer vibes a little bit. I could be totally off. That's just like what I'm getting from the back of the book. I'm hoping to get to this in the next few weeks. I'd love to read it before its release date. I'm excited to read this one too. I guess I should stop saying that I'm excited to read these, because if I bought them, I should be excited to read all of them. I bought one book off Pengo in the last few weeks, and so the book I got off Pengo is Good Girl by Aria Aber. Good Girl takes place in Berlin. I don't know if it ever says like the time period, but I'm thinking it's like the early 2000s. It follows Nila, who is the daughter of Afghan immigrants living in Berlin. This was one of the books I just finished. Nila is really struggling with her identity, like both racially, but also who she wants to be in the world, like struggling with her ambition and just like her like sense of purpose and sense of place. So there's a lot of internalized struggling in this story. And Nila ends up meeting Marlowe, who is this much older man. He's this like American writer, and she kind of gets like wrapped up in his world, which is not great. I have a lot of thoughts about that. Anyway, I finished this recently. I absolutely loved this. I love the writing style. It was really dreamy, but not like dreamy in this like you know, magical, like ethereal way. More dreamy is in like this like hazy, kind of like cloudy, philosophical way. I thought Nilo was a really strong character, but this definitely has a very like murky, meandering plot, which might not be for everyone, but that's definitely for me. There's a really interesting blend in this book between like racial tensions, art and creativity, and this like edgy nightlife kind of culture. I don't want to talk too much about this, but I did pick it up recently. I read it, I loved it, and we'll talk more about it in my May wrap up. I had a ton of pre-orders for like the last 2-ish months. I pre-ordered 3 April releases. I pre-ordered them all from Barnes & Noble during one of Barnes & Noble's like pre-order promotions where you got 25% off pre-orders. I'm gonna talk about these in order of release date. Okay, so the first thing I pre-ordered was Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. This is a story about a woman named Linda. Linda is sexually obsessed with planes, and she plans to marry a plane by dying in a plane crash. That's kind of all I got out of the summary. I don't actually know how like plot heavy this book is, but it seems to be a really like strange, witty, fun, like raunchy read. I saw this on a few like anticipated 2025 releases lists, and it never really called out to me. It never really caught my attention, but I read Out There, Kate Folk's short story collection. I read that in January and absolutely loved it, and immediately pre-ordered this as soon as I finished Out There. So I just love Kate Folk's writing. I think she's someone that feels like she has fun with her writing, which I absolutely love. I'm not sure when I'll get to this one, but I would love to pick it up over the summer. It feels like a really fun summer read. I know a lot of people tend to gravitate towards romance in the summer, and like I do want to pick up a summer romance in the summer, but I don't know, there's just something about reading like a weird speculative book in the summer when you're like hot and sweaty and sticky. I don't know, it just like feels, I don't know, it feels like appropriate. Something about like weird books and heat just, I don't know, it just feels like a perfect match. Speaking of summer romances, does this book take place in the summer? I don't know. I did also pre-order Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, which I have been calling Great Big Beautiful World in my head until literally I sat down to take notes for this video. Yeah, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about this book. Everybody who cares about it already knows about it, I feel like, and if you don't care about it, you probably don't want to hear me summarize it anyway. This is the only book from Emily Henry I've pre-ordered, and I literally only pre-ordered it because of the Barnes & Noble promotion, because I knew I was gonna buy it anyway and just thought I would get it on sale. And then some of the early reviews have been pretty polarizing, and I've been seeing it comped to Evelyn Hugo, which truthfully I did not love. So now I'm just a little bit skeptical about reading it. I've never been one to read her stuff like right when it comes out. The closest one was Funny Story, which I just read. I think I just read in January, but every other one of her books I've read like a year or two after its release. So I was like, this is the year I'm ahead of the game, and now I don't know, it doesn't have great reviews. Another romance novel though that came out on the same day that Great Big Beautiful Life came out is Anywhere You Go by Bridget Morrissey. I'm pitching this as a like summertime version of The Holiday, like that Christmas movie. It's a sapphic romance. It follows 2 women who do a house swap. One lives in New York City and the other lives in this like small Midwestern town. And I think the New York City woman is like super career driven, and the Midwestern woman has this like crush on her co-worker, the waitress she works with. That's the gist of this book. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know the summary too well because I don't really care what this book is about. I loved Bridget Morrissey's last book, That Summer Feeling. That is one of my all-time favorite books. I One, I'm a sucker for a good summer camp story, and two, that book just nailed it. I pre-ordered this so fast after reading That Summer Feeling. I cannot wait to read this. I am putting this on my June TBR, I already know that, so hopefully I get to it in June and we'll have thoughts to share after I finish this, but I have like really high hopes for that one. Okay, the last thing I pre-ordered is a book that came out last year, but I pre-ordered the paperback release, and that's All Fours by Miranda July. To be honest with you, I don't know what book is about, other than I'm pretty sure it's about a woman having like a midlife crisis. I know it starts off with her like abandoning a road trip. I've seen some pretty mixed reviews on this book. I think people either really love it or they really hate it. I picked this up solely because I'm reading through the Women's Prize shortlist, which you'll see a theme. I have Good Girl by Aria Abra was on the shortlist, and then I have two books that I also will be talking about that's also on the shortlist. If it wasn't shortlisted for the Women's Prize, I honestly probably would have skipped this. I do think I'm actually more excited to read it after reading through some of the reviews, and I do think I personally am going to like it. Some of the more like negative skewed reviews say that this book is like too sexual or like too raunchy, and it seems like some of those elements are more for like shock value and edginess. And to be honest, like that doesn't really bother me all that much. I've been watching Veep recently, which is also extremely raunchy, and so I guess like I think I'm just like kind of in the mood. Maybe at a different point I wouldn't have appreciated maybe that level of like commentary. I'm actually planning to pick this up after I finish the book I'm currently reading, so like if I sprint through my current read and finish this, I might be able to talk about it in my May wrap up, but likely I'll probably start this at the end of May and finish this in early June. Those were all my pre-orders. Let's talk about the books I picked up at Barnes & Noble. I think I only went to Barnes & Noble once in the last few months, and I picked up 3 things all on the same trip. Oh, and I read all 3 of these. I read all 3 of the things I picked up at Barnes & Noble. That's actually really good. Okay, I went into Barnes & Noble specifically for Fundamentally by Nusaba Yunus. This is another Women's Prize shortlist. This follows Nadia. She is a professor in the UK, and like after going through a breakup, she moves to Iraq to work for the UN in a program that's what they are calling like rehabilitating ISIS brides. Nadia runs into like a lot of challenges with the UN, with just like politics, both like, you know, politics in a very like large global sense, but also politics in like a much smaller organizational sense. Nadia meets this young woman named Sarah, who is one of these ISIS brides, who is originally from the UK, and Nadia really forms this like connection with Sarah. She sees Sarah as this like younger version of herself, and Nadia really commits to doing everything she can to get Sarah back home. I ultimately really enjoyed this. I think this is a really funny, solid, contemporary story. It's written in first person point of view. Nadia's voice is really strong. The story definitely leans more like humorous and satirical rather than serious and emotional, so that might not be for everybody, but I genuinely really loved it. I did finish this in April, and I talk more about it in my April wrap up if you're interested in hearing more about my thoughts on Fundamentally, but overall I did really enjoy this. Okay, the next 2 things I picked up at Barnes & Noble are the 2 manga volumes that I got. I'm so lucky that they are both in stock. I picked up volumes 6 and 7 of Witch Hat Atelier. I'm not going to talk about these 2 volumes specifically because obviously they're in the middle of the series. I also read these both in April, and so I talk about them more fully in my April wrap up as well. This follows the young girl named Coco. She accidentally, at the beginning of the story, casts a spell that turns her mother to stone, and she's kind of like adopted and becomes this apprentice and is learning about spells in order to like help her mother. At this point in the series, like where I'm at in these volumes, we're starting to get introduced to much more like darker and sinister storylines outside of just Coco. I love this series. I read a lot of manga, and Witch Hat Atelier is one of my favorite series that I'm reading, and I think it's a great manga series to read if you don't read manga. All right, last weekend I went to visit my grandma in Saratoga, and I went to Northshire Bookstore, which is an indie bookstore in Saratoga, because I was killing time before our dinner reservation. And of course I got books. So let's talk about the 2 books I got. The first book I picked up from the bookstore is the book I'm actually currently reading. Look at that. I bought a book and within the week I'm reading it. Let's talk about how much that ever happens, which is literally never. Anyway, I'm reading The Persian by Sanam Muluji. This is a story about 5 Iranian women in the same family. It's like a multi-generational story. I know it spans many years. And the story starts with one of the women, like in the more modern timeline, being arrested on like their annual family vacation. And then I think the story is going to, from there, I think the story is like her working to clear her family's name at the same time, like while women in the other generations are dealing with things in their life. I'm like 50 pages into it, okay? I am liking this so far. I think this is a story that has a lot of elements that I really like. I really love a multi-POV story. I especially like it when it's like a family saga across generations. I'm not sure if I would have picked this up if it wasn't shortlisted for the Women's Prize. I actually, when I went to Barnes & Noble, I was deciding between like these 2 to purchase, and I obviously ended up with Fundamentally. I'm hoping to finish it in a couple days and then I'll pick up all 4s, and yeah, I will definitely finish this by the end of May. So this will be in my May wrap up, my thoughts about it once I finish it. The last book I picked up from the Northshire Bookstore up in Saratoga, it was kind of a whim. Like I didn't go in with the intention of picking this up, whereas like The Persians was on my list of books to get, and that's Greta and Valdine by Rebecca K. Riley. This seems like it's more of like a all vibes, no plot type of book, which is right up my alley, so I'm excited for that. It follows 2 siblings. I think both siblings are queer, but definitely the brother. It seems like messy, it seems dramatic. I don't know what else to say about it, but I'm here for it. I also think this would be like a really great, like sticky, summery read. So I'd love to pick this up in June or July. I'm probably gonna pick this up after I finish working through the Women's Prize shortlist, but yeah, I would love to read this sometime soon as well. Wow, look at all of those. So pretty. All right, those were all of the books. I had 12 books I picked up in the last 2-ish months. Yeah, I'm definitely good. I'm good for a while. I'm feeling a little gluttonous looking at this stack. Of the 12, I've read 4 and I'm currently reading 1 more, so that's almost half, not quite half. Okay, aside from the manga, 8 of the books I got were published in 2025 and these 2 were published in 2024. Wow, that's actually sickening. I did not realize that. If you've watched this far to the end, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Looking ahead, I'm planning to post my May wrap up maybe next week. That's going to include some of the books on this stack. Thank you so much for watching, for being here, for being interested in my little book haul, my huge gigantic book haul. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you again soon.